And so we're taking away some of this responsiveness from mothers. And the other thing that's taking place when we are actually experiencing the sensations is this feedback loop back to the brain.
Hmm.
And so we're feeling these intense sensations. We can label it as pain, and that's going to the brain and it's saying more oxytocin, more endorphins. And then we are able to cope with the intensity in a different way. But when we are numbing that response, then there is no feedback loop. And so
Hmm.
we're taking away a lot of the endorphins and a lot of the oxytocin that is allowing this process to unfold, and therefore taking away that high that you're experiencing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, and you can't, like, now you're not able to move. Sometimes it is not exactly a dance, but there is this connection between the baby moves a certain way. Maybe you've got that pain in your hip. So then that helps you to shift your position because maybe babes is having some trouble making their way around that bone. Because I mean, we're all the same inside, but we're not all the same inside. So pelvises are different. Some people have a really flat bone. Some people have a nice rounded bone at the front. And so babes is going to have to work a different way to get into that pelvis. So then that pain tells you to move. But if you don't feel it, you can't move. You can't do that. And I think that's in part where this coached pushing comes from. That you have to take that deep breath in, and you have everybody watching the monitor. And then they're like, okay, take a deep breath in. Now here comes a contraction because she can't feel it. So then she's trying to push. And
Yeah.
yeah, so all of those things that happen in the body, you can't step in and change one part of it and not change the rest of it. And for me, informed consent, like that should be at the forefront of everything, informed consent. But, if you, I mean, we know sometimes epidurals, especially given at a certain point, they're going to slow down and stop everything. So then they've got to augment with oxytocin. I've seen very, very few epidurals that they haven't had to augment. And some babies respond well to it, some women's bodies respond well to it, some don't. So but then you're introducing all of these things, but they don't come in and say, okay, so this is where you're at in labor, and these are the chances that this is what an epidural is going to do right now. Here's the other things we can do to help you get through the next couple of hours until it maybe is a better time for you and baby to have an epidural. But no, it's just they come in, and sometimes they'll say to people, okay, before the nurse comes in, these are the things that you need to ask her or that you need to bring up, and you need to get these answers from her. But then I've had them say, well, I've heard that an epidural can slow my labor down. Well, I've heard it can speed it up. I've heard oxytocin will be with the epidural and that can cause problems. I've heard that they make things better. Well, that's not informed consent. That's not answering her questions. That's like none of that. And and they tell you, well, there comes a certain point where they won't give you an epidural anymore. But I've had anesthetists come in and it's like, okay, but she's starting to push. Like, there's no point now. She's starting to push, and then you're almost like squaring up, like just back off and let her push this baby out. But I've had them like rush and get an epidural in. Well, why? Now the baby's born, she's numb, she has an epidural in. There was absolutely no point for this. And some hospitals, they have a dedicated anesthetist for labor and delivery, and that's all they do all day. And then there's other hospitals where they don't have a dedicated one. So if they're busy, if there's a lot of operations going on that day, you might have to wait and they might not show up. And so then what that says to me is, well, then it's not medically necessary. If they can tell you, sorry, they're busy, then, well, there should be something else you can do. And I've seen laughing gas be great. but I don't really understand why a lot of them are so hesitant to use laughing gas. Like, well, we'll give you some morphine, but couldn't we like try the gentlest thing first and then move along? And obviously, I don't know if there's any connection here, but we have a huge fentanyl crisis. They use fentanyl in epidurals. So someone who's using fentanyl is obviously in pain. So they're using this to help with that pain. And what if that's doing is taking them back to this beautiful time in utero? Like,
Mhm.
wouldn't we all want to go back to that? So again, for me, what's a big problem with a lot of these things is there are no long-term studies being done. There's no follow-up being done. So then how can you continue to do this when you're not keeping track of people? You're not keeping track of what's going on. And there was a movement in hospitals, probably started in the late 90s into the 2000s, and you'd see people wearing these big pins as no pain. And that's fantastic if you're in like end of life care or oncology or post-op, absolutely. But then that was brought into labor and delivery, and that's not the right place for it. That's a whole part of this process. And I just think that we really need to look at that pain in a much different way.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's disrupting the hormonal cascade that's
Yeah.
occurring. And like you said, we don't have a lot of long term studies to see how this is affecting mother and baby long term. The other thing that I wanted to touch upon is if it's not medically necessary, but we are treating this like a medical event, what if for the woman who wants an epidural, that's her plan since day one, and the anesthetist doesn't show up on time and she's faced with this now unmedicated birth that was not her birth plan, not her desire at all. She did not want to feel anything. This is why we still, no matter what, have to do the prep. And like you said,
Hmm.
it is such a mental game. Like 85 to 90%, maybe more, is the mental aspect. So rewiring our mind is so important in this, because what if the anesthetist doesn't show up? What if the epidural doesn't really work on you? What if it only works on half of your body and
Hmm.
you're left feeling so much that you weren't expecting to feel? And so that informed consent that you're describing and the mental preparation is so foundational no matter what your plan is going in.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm glad that you brought that up because I'd forgotten to mention that sometimes an epidural doesn't take. Sometimes you only feel it in half of your uterus, but it's still there and there's nothing they can do about it because that's the way the nerve endings come up and into your spine. And so that, yeah, you're absolutely right. You still have to do the prep. You still have to know how you're going to deal with this, how you're going to face this. And I often tell people, like, you have to choose how you're going to take your pain because it's not like it isn't painful to now be lying in that bed for hours. And it's not like it isn't painful to have forceps or a vacuum extraction. And it's not like it isn't painful to lie there and watch your baby not responding well to the oxytocin. And it's not like it isn't painful to now have to have a cesarean. So you don't always get that cascade, but you do have to make a decision. And I think that that can also, because I have been to births where everything went wrong, everything went wrong. And they had an emergency cesarean that there were problems with, and they still feel really positive about their birth experience. And that's because they felt that they made the decisions that were right for them. They didn't feel like things were done to them. They didn't feel like their power was taken away from them. Yes, all these other things happened, but I made good decisions when I had to make them. And I've seen people have like really positive births that feel terrible about it afterwards. And in some ways, because they didn't speak up, they didn't do the things they wanted to do, so I think, yeah, that deciding how it is you're going to take your pain. And that's what's going to give you some power in this situation where you don't really have a lot of power.
Yeah.
And it's funny too, often in prenatal classes, that people don't, they think that labor starts and the pain starts and that's it for the next however many hours. And they don't understand that it comes, it has this wave, it peaks, it goes away. And yeah, with a breech baby, sometimes you can have back labor that will continue, but that's typically how it goes. It comes, peaks, it goes away. And, I've been to labors where, we're having a conversation. She goes, yeah, and I think he was just, wait, yeah, he directed that one. He didn't act in that movie. And so you can really have like these breaks get shorter and shorter, but you have these moments where it's just like nothing's really going on. And I kind of explain it like it's kind of like stubbing your toe. You stub your toe and your brain, you are overwhelmed by this feeling, but then it goes away. And that's kind of what labor's like. And it's funny that you can see women like it's sort of like they're looking off into space. I think it's, yeah, yeah, okay, here comes another one. But it's that, like, just feeling it out, because sometimes you can have a really strong contraction and then there's like a little hiccup. There isn't, it's like the uterus is like, whoa, I gotta shake that off.
Yeah, it's a good reminder to let people preparing for this experience know that it is not just like a flat line of intensity. There are peaks and valleys. And so that's why I think the metaphor of a wave is so helpful. There is
Hmm.
that increase, that crescendo, decrescendo. And from my experience, I don't think I could have tolerated if it was just a flat line of intensity. It was like learning through the experience that there was this peak and then this break. And again, that peak and that break was really helpful, knowing that in the next breath, I was going to get some relief. And I could talk about who directed that movie,
Yeah.
whoever, if I wanted to, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. And I think that people are often very surprised by that, like by
Mhm.
that just that break where there's some relief. And I think that when I first started doing this, I remember reading somewhere it takes 10 years for something that's accepted in the birthing community to be used in hospitals. And like pretty much 10 years to the moment was when some of these things started to come in, people encouraging women to move. It seems so obvious, but they would come into the room at first and say, "You have to get back in that bed." Well, like, why? Why? It's the chance of her being like 4 centimeters dilated and a baby falling out, like that is incredibly slim.
Mhm.
But so getting women up and moving and allowing them to labor on the toilet, then getting birthing stools in so that you could sit on the birthing stool instead of on the toilet. And at the same time, letting women sit in the bathroom if they want. Sometimes women just want to be in the bathroom the whole time. Dim the lights, shut the door. They feel completely safe and they can just labor there. And, I was at a birth where the midwife was like, okay, you need to get off the toilet. No, you need to get off the toilet. Okay. And just shoved her hands in to grab that baby's hand. It was like, can I get you to stand up now? And stood up, and babes just out they came. And it was great. Like, it was such a nice, gentle birth for baby, for her, like for everybody. And I really liked that the way she was just very calmly at first. You're going to have to get up now. You're going to have to get up now. You're going, okay, you got to stand up right now.
There's the baby coming out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, here's the baby.
I'm also a big proponent of laboring on the toilet. The dilation station worked really well for me.
That's a great term for it.
Yeah, and it is again taking something away from the laboring person when they are told that they can't do the thing that their body is telling them that they need to do.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And for her, like she couldn't the reason why she made her way to the toilet was at first she was so tired and just needed to lie down for a while, but lying down was excruciating. So then she had to get up, but she was too tired to be standing. So she decided to sit on the toilet for a bit, and because that felt the best because there was that gap underneath, nothing pressing on her. So of course then everything just completely relaxed and the baby was able to make their way out.
Yeah. So anyone listening, that's an option. You can labor on the toilet. It's a perfect space. Marnie, before we wrap up, is there something that you just feel like I just want to scream this from the rooftops? I want everyone who's preparing for birth to know this one thing. And it might lead into my last question, but I want to get into that.
I would say that really, no matter what your experiences have been in life up to this point, no matter what it is, whatever negative things you feel about yourself, about your ability, about your strength, say goodbye to that. Just embrace. If you have to think of what would I be like? What would I look like? What would I sound like? How would I move if I was that person that felt really confident going into this situation? Who would I be? So imagine yourself as that person, see yourself as that person. And that's really going to help at least start taking you down that path to find those things in yourself or in your birth attendants, in where you want to birth, in being able to speak up for yourself because there really is no right or wrong. And if at the end someone says to you, well, healthy baby, healthy mom, why do you feel so bad about this? You have every reason to have your feelings and reach out for help. And especially for a lot of us, especially if we're the person that people come to for help, it's really, really hard for us to say we need help. And so be that person that asks for help. And yeah.
Hmm. It is a skill in parenthood to know how to
Hmm.
ask for help because although we very much idolize this parent who does everything on their own and is so strong and never needs help, no, that's just a fallacy. And we parent best and we heal best when we do it in community and we pull on our community network for the times when we need to lean on them the most. That's what
Hmm.
makes us strong.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think if we want to call them walls, but building up those walls so that you look like you're the person that never needs help, that is only hurting you. And
Hmm.
that's actually keeping people away. And you can be an incredibly strong person. And this was difficult for me to learn too, that empathy is a strength. I mean, I was really raised like empathy, sadness, all of those things. Those are weaknesses and you should not feel those things. And I think that it took me a long time to realize what an incredibly powerful thing empathy is. And really to feel that you also have to allow yourself to be vulnerable.
Hmm. Yeah, especially in parenthood, our vulnerability can be a
Hmm.
strength. Yeah,
Yeah,
I've learned
yeah.
that along the way as well. Because I too, like
Abs-
so many of us, have been raised where that's all weakness. We don't need any
yeah,
help.
yeah, absolutely. And I think also as a parent, you're going to make mistakes. Like that's going to happen. And if you're open and vulnerable, then you can admit that was a mistake. You can say you're sorry and you can think of the circumstances around that made you snap and not be the calm, patient parent that you'd like to be. Maybe you were making sure everybody else was fed and hydrated and had a nap, and you haven't slept and you haven't eaten in hours. And yeah, you're just a human being. But if you push that away, oh, well, that wasn't my fault, or that was all these other things, and that was them, then you don't give yourself that opportunity to really look at what happened and hopefully not do it again or not do it that way again.
Hmm. Yeah, so many of the messages on this podcast come back to caring for yourself first, or getting, it's not even caring for yourself first, because that's, I think in parenthood, we are actually interdependent with our community. We need to be cared for so that we can
Hmm.
care for the other people. But it does require this awareness that you're talking about. I also need fuel and more than just the scraps of my kids' breakfast for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I'm also a whole human who needs to be nourished and cared for. And then we can offer ourselves from this place of having our cup full instead of from depletion and
Hmm.
resentment, which I think so many of us can fall into quite easily.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. And burnout's a real thing. And for women, I can't remember what the new term is for chronic fatigue. I think it affects women more than men because I think women have experienced a lot of trauma in their lives, which really then that's going to affect your whole adrenal system. And then you have babies, and then you get exposed to a virus, and you're not slowing down. You're not listening to your body, and then now you can't get out of bed.
Mhm.
And then that's something that takes up so much. It's like anything, it takes so much more work once you have a problem. It takes so much more work to get rid of that problem than to just take the steps beforehand to not have gotten there in the first place.
Yeah. Prevention is the best medicine, even though we don't like to hear that. But it truly is. So many
Yeah,
of us, I think, we need a wake up call, and that usually comes in the form of whatever the problem is.
absolutely.
So, Marnie, as my last question, so much of the mission of this podcast is to prepare families for the birth experience so that the initial imprint that takes place on this new life that's entering this 3D reality that we inhabit is an imprint of, it's like a big welcome party. It's love, it's safety, it's trust, it's connection. And those are all signatures of oxytocin. When the
Hmm.
physiologic birth process unfolds, the hormonal cascade unfolds as it is designed to. And that's not always the case. Often, what happens is it's an imprint of mistrust, of survival mode, of not feeling very safe. And that imprint lasts a lifetime. It's not permanent. There are things that we can do to repair. But again, as we were saying, prevention is the best medicine. And I think when enough of us are imprinted with that big welcome party, that love, safety, and trust, we'll be looking at a very different world.
Hmm.
And so for me, this has very big picture impacts, but the birth experience is the microcosm of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So with that being said, what would you like to imprint onto the listeners, the ears of the listeners? It's a lot of new moms, it's a lot of families preparing for birth. It's also women who are entrepreneurial in spirit and want to birth something beautiful and creative into this world.
I think, I guess there's a few different things. Like one is, uh, in a sense, prepare for the unexpected, which of course is impossible. But really, all you can do is kind of prepare yourself intellectually and emotionally to just embrace chaos. Because no matter what you do, how well you plan, how little or incredible amount of money and support you have, chaos will follow. That first time when you try to leave the house with the baby, it will take you 3 times as long to get out of the house that you expect. And so, really opening yourself to that, never believing that what you're doing is like, as long as you are loving that baby, you're looking after them, you're providing a safe environment for them, nothing you're doing is wrong. That everyone has a different way of parenting, and parenting is the most competitive sport you will ever play. And it's good, don't get drawn into that game. Someone might say to you, "Oh, your baby's not sitting up yet." Well, my baby got accepted to Harvard. So you have to really learn to feel good about who you are and what you're doing. And yeah, you'll have times where you're like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And that's okay too. Babies are incredibly forgiving. And so you put their little onesie on and you've got all the snaps mixed up. That doesn't matter. You leave the house and you realize that you actually have a bit of crusty puke on your shirt. And that happens too. It doesn't matter. Just try to let as much of that stuff go as you can. And if someone's coming over and they're going to judge you for this, the state of yourself or the state of the house, do not let that person come over. It's okay to say no. It's okay to say, you cannot come into my blessed little sanctuary now. And I think also to give yourself that time. Some people feel like immediately they should be up, their hair done, a nice outfit on, the house clean, the baby fine. Like, don't put that pressure on yourself. Give yourself that time to just relax and enjoy. And in some ways, like, what made you happy when life was simpler? Embrace that and try not to let all the other stuff come in. And also remember, a lot of postpartum pictures that are taken of moms and babies, that's not that baby's mom. That is a model that was brought in for the day to pose with that baby. So if you don't look like this model who has never had a baby before, don't judge yourself for that. In fact, don't judge yourself at all. Just let yourself be. And just remember, you are a spiritual being that has solidified into human form. Just enjoy the experience of being human
In all its messy glory.
and all its messy, chaotic insanity.
Oh, I love that message so much. I needed to hear it, so I know that the people listening also needed to hear it. Thank you so much, Marnie. This has been such a pleasure. I really, really appreciate you coming on and taking the time because you have such a varied background in this arena and you bring so many different facets of your life and your experience from being a parent yourself to showing up for parents, and your curiosity about life really shines through. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, thanks. And thanks for having me on. I've really enjoyed listening to your podcast. I've really enjoyed hearing the variety of people you've had on and the things they have to say and their experiences. It feels great. It feels like even though I don't know these people, it has helped to make me feel more connected to a community of women. So thank you for having me on and thank you for doing that.
Oh, thank you for saying that. That really encourages me to keep doing this because I do really enjoy it. Marnie, if people want to get in touch with you, if they're curious about what you're up to, or they just really loved this episode and they want to let you know that they appreciate you, how can they do that?
The best way is probably through my website, which is just my name is marnieparrell.com. And my email is there, and you can have a look at some of the things I'm doing. I've just changed my host recently, so I'm redoing my website. So it is a little chaotic right now.
Appropriately so.
There's a lot there for, and so that's the best way to get in touch with me.
Okay, amazing. I'm going to put that in the show notes so everyone can access that easily. And again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for this.
Oh, you're welcome. It was a lot of fun.
Bye, Marnie.
Bye.